Hello, public opinion aficionados, and welcome to Rasmussen Reports, the independent pollster who thought he was done until Election Day, except when a polling topic blows up overnight and makes it to number one on Twitter trending, there's probably some information that you need to know. So I'm going to school you about the latest topic that the left is grasping at straws over, and that is the state of Iowa. But before we go there, if you're interested in my outlook on the race, I just did a video on it. I think that Trump wins the national popular vote, probably in the 2 to 4 point vicinity, which is better than he's done at any point in the last 8 years. And it also means that he should probably sweep all the battleground states. Now, that might be a little bit different than what you're hearing on the news, but in my opinion, it's just because mainstream media outlets just can't bring themselves to tell you that Donald Trump is the overwhelming favorite in this race. And before we move on, pause the video and take a moment of silence for poor Peanut and Fred, who received far more harsh justice than any single client on the Epstein list. And another note, in my last video, I talked about maps, and this one is updated and corrected. This is our outlook based on our state polling, with toss-ups only any race that's between plus or minus 1 point. And why I'm showing you this is because inadvertently we showed Utah blue, which is absolutely not the case. Actually, it should probably be bright red there. But if anybody here has used 270 to win, you know how an errant click can ruin your day. And so, listen, Donald Trump's probably going to get 297 electoral votes, not the 291 we said last time, based on this. But if the results are a point or two to the right of our polls, and I think they will be, it's very possible and likely that Donald Trump picks up New Hampshire and Michigan and maybe even Virginia. What would that look like? 329. Interesting. I think that there's a chance that happens. So let's talk about Iowa. And this is the Des Moines Register, who polls with a woman named Ann Seltzer, who everybody in the industry worships because I guess apparently Iowa is a pretty tough state to poll. And she's done a pretty good job in the past. I think she actually nailed the last 2 elections within a point or two. Iowa poll, Kamala Harris leapfrogs Donald Trump to take the lead near Election Day. Here's how. Now, listen, everybody knew this poll was coming. Apparently, it leaked in Democrat circles, and they were passing it around like the latest fresh hopium hit. And a little bit of context, there have been problems with this pollster this year. Apparently, in June, she ran a poll after the debate that showed Donald Trump beating Joe Biden in Iowa by 18 points, which is like basically almost a 10-point move to the right since 2020. A massive shift. But what was interesting is she didn't publish it until, in my understanding, Rich Barris found out about the poll. And it was a huge embarrassment. But now she puts out a poll with Harris somehow inexplicably leading in Iowa by 3 points. And that is just incredible because it represents a 21-point move to the left, something that we haven't seen in any single state. And like, listen, the Democrats didn't make a visit to Iowa. I don't think there's been any ad spend in Iowa. And in fact, we don't even know what Iowans think about Kamala Harris because when she ran for president in 2020, she didn't even make it to the Iowa caucus. So anyways, a lot is going around Twitter about this stupid poll. The same poll had Trump leading Biden 18 points in June, an unbelievable 21-point swing. But Colin, I mean, many people are just blatantly seeing through this. I said this exact quote 2 days ago. I am seeing a coordinated left-wing operation claiming there is momentum shift towards Harris. I've seen this on X, Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, and you are now seeing it in the media. Yeah, they got nothing left. They really needed to hit this weekend news cycle hard. I'm not going to go watch George Stephanopoulos, but I guarantee you right now, him and all his cronies on all the mainstream media outlets are talking about her stunning and brave comeback. They're creating a narrative that Kamala Harris is seeing a surprising surge in support. This is only to discourage right-wingers from voting. They do this every election, and they're doing it now, just like the doom phase that Rich Barris talked about. And they really are, I mean, clinging to this. Look, this is Ann Seltzer's Twitter, and she literally just corrected her spelling on a tweet here that one of the polling accounts put up. And it's got 31,000 Blue Anon likes. Well, this is funny. Happy retirement. Now, if you want to know more about the details of this poll, I don't want to make a super long video. Our friend Seth Keshel has done a really good type up that just came out this morning. You should go to his Substack and read it. And what's also fascinating is, like, nobody has polled Iowa this cycle at all. But on the very same day, hours before the legendary Ann Seltzer drops her poll, Emerson came out showing Trump plus 10. Now, in my opinion, Emerson's pretty good. I think that they hurt a little bit. I think they probably err a little bit to the left. If I polled Iowa, and listen, I'd love to, but there's just not enough time. I'm pretty sure I'd find a Trump plus 10 or 12. Actually, I don't know. In my safe Republican states like Ohio and Texas, I have been getting lefter results than some other people. I have Ohio at Trump plus 7. I think he's going to do way better than that. But my point is, when an entire country moves right, one random right state is not going to move left massively. I mean, a Harris plus 3. And you're going to see a lot of people talk about margin of errors here too. I mean, there's just no way. There's no way this is real. But let's talk about the national polling, which I mentioned. And we didn't really go into it much last time. But what is fascinating is it's still Trump leading. And a lot of final calls are dropping. Some of these people have done massive and complete round trips. We looked at NBC before that went from Harris plus 5 back to tied. New York Times, Siena, their national number, their last national number was tie. Rasmussen reports we're at 2, but everybody knows our final call is 3. They haven't updated it yet. Forbes Harris X, this is actually, they had Trump plus 2. Now they're jerking back to Harris plus 2. They probably wanted to show a Harris lead and figured it would cancel out. And so, I mean, this is basically a tie too. Morning Consult narrowed a point to 2. They're coming to the right. They're usually like, they were like Biden plus 50 back in 2020. So really ABC News Ipsos is the one that's farthest out at Harris plus 3. I'm pretty sure if we looked at their crosstabs, we would find some wacky stuff. Yeah, look, okay. Trump supporters are extremely dissatisfied with the candidates. That is not the case. I only have 20 to 30% of Trump supporters actually holding their nose to vote Trump. This is a really big sign. I will say the Harris supporters look a little bit more dissatisfied as well than I would have expected. But here, look. Here, look at this favorability numbers. In almost every single one of my polls, Harris and Trump in the battlegrounds have almost exact favorability. Same thing. And nationally, actually, Donald Trump leads Harris a little bit. They have Harris at a net favorability of 0. They have Trump underwater 23 points. Literally, their sample hates Trump. And only 37% think that Trump has the temperament to serve effectively. They have built, they're using this Ipsos panel, which has shown itself time and time again this cycle to be absolutely Trump deranged. But going back, Emerson shows a tie right in line with New York Times. Tip's been all over the place. It's a tracking poll. This looks like a final call. Trump plus 1. They were really accurate last time. I know their methodology changed. I know it's online only now. I know it's a little bit to the left. Maybe Donald Trump wins the national popular vote by 2 or 3 points, like we're saying, maybe even more. And NBC News, yeah, look at this. They were at Harris plus 5, and now they're back to 2 polls in a row that showed the race tied. Look, here's the Reuters round trip. I just can't. I mean, look at this. Trump plus 1 to Harris plus 6. Back to Harris plus 1. What is Morning Consult? Oh, my word. Trump plus 1 to Harris plus 6. Now to Harris plus 2. I wonder if this really is their final call. Maybe they'll squeak out one more national number. Really be funny to watch it be like a tie. But here are the latest numbers for the battlegrounds. And this still all looks really great for Trump because, as we've talked about time and time again, look, the national popular vote at the very least, call it tie. The battleground should be 4 to 5 points to the right of that. And so all of this is a miss to the left, as it's been time and time again with Trump on the ballot. But Michigan, this was up to almost Harris +1. Now it's back to Harris and a half. I think a lot of people are putting out final polls. And what's interesting is you can look and see what they are. Like New York Times, Siena has Arizona at Trump +4. But if you went and looked at every single one of these states, what you'd see is that if you average them out, it's basically exactly a tie. And they pick states for Harris that kind of, Michigan, okay, that's a tie, but then they're going to say like North Carolina goes to Harris. So it all kind of cancels out. I think they're trying to basically just get a 0 polling error while still showing that Harris can win it. What is crazy is that in the full field, Trump actually wins, but in the head-to-head, Harris wins, I think by 1 point in either direction. So they're basically putting out exactly tied. And many other final call state sets are doing the exact same thing. Not Atlas Intel and not us, but everybody else is doing their best, tripping over themselves to show that this race is tied. And as we've talked about before, too close to call is media speak for Trump is winning. Now we can talk about why that is. Maybe it's because they get better ratings if they show that the race is neck and neck. Maybe it's because their desperate viewers can't stand the cognitive dissonance of a world where Trump wins. Maybe they're shilling for Democrats. I really don't know, but it's absolutely crazy. And what is fascinating as we're talking about New York Times is this little topic here. Now, Nate Cohn's been talking a lot, and we went into his opinions about the recalled vote and how they differ from ours and how we're using it and how it sandbags Trump support in our polling. If I took the recall vote off, Donald Trump would be winning our national numbers by 5. I just tested it. It's crazy. New York Times pollster Nate Cohn announces white Republicans were not answering their polls nearly as much as Democrats and say the polling miss could be similar to 2020, which would be massive, 3 to 4 points to the left, meaning that Donald Trump, according to the New York Times, gets a +3 on the national popular vote and swings and sweeps every single swing state, just like we said. 4 years ago, the polls were thought to underestimate Mr. Trump because of non-response bias, in which his supporters were less likely to take surveys than demographically similar Biden supporters. It's hard to measure non-response bias. After all, we couldn't reach these demographically similar voters. But one measure I track from time to time is the proportion of who responds to a survey. Across these final polls, white Democrats were 16% likelier to respond than white Republicans. And I've been talking about this in the videos. It's one of the reasons I've said that my last set of state polls was really tough because the mix of the panels just changed and a lot of Republicans dropped out of the polls. The most likely reason is they already voted, and the only people answering are the ones that are trying to put out positive headlines for Harris. But on average, I'm really happy with our state polling. I think it's right, although I do think it underestimates all the low propensity voters that are breaking for Trump bigger than they ever have, and also the massive turnout disparity that we're starting to see in early voting returns. But here it is. Rich hooking me up with the props. How many times did we say all last week that Republicans were no longer talking to pollsters? But that's not what Mr. New York Times was saying. Now he drops polls giving Harris supporters hope with the caveat that he thinks he's wrong because Rich and I were right. I love it. I responded with a Dancy Trolley guy. And speaking of Nate's, here's Nate Silver, another person putting out an exactly tied race. This has been crazy. I kind of joked that this has really been tracking which of Nate's personalities is in control at the moment. But I think he's going to finish out at exactly 50-50. And the polls, I don't think, say this at all. Like literally New York Times, which is 538's #1 rated pollster, came out and said that the polls are probably going to miss again to the left and understate Trump support. Yep. Nate Silver, all that time and money his newsletter followers have spent reading all of these words about the polling industry, and it all comes down to a coin flip. Speaking of coin flips, here is the betting market. And I've been talking about this because it's it's a pretty fascinating novelty. I do think in certain circumstances, it can show a response to situations. Like if we actually look back at a month ago, I think somewhere around here, this is when the Nazi stuff broke. And it actually did move the betting market for like a day or two, and then it immediately disappeared. But look, even though the pollsters are breaking right, Donald Trump's odds of winning in the betting market are inexorably dwindling in a very controlled manner. Now, I do have to make an apology because I didn't interpret this correctly in the past, but it says that there's been $3 billion of volume in this one particular market. Now, I asked Polymarket for clarification. They didn't get back to me, but what I now think this really is the total notional value of all the trades. Meaning that if I, bought $10 for Trump and then sold $9, it would show up as 19 when the carrying value is only $1. So I actually looked at a period of time. You can actually look at the activity of the trades. I sorted by $10,000 and downloaded 6 hours of results, a period in which the betting market contracted 8 points for Trump. And I found the net flows driving that 8-point movement was only $625,000. So I really do think it is possible for this to be manipulated by a relatively small amount of money. And if you look at the state numbers, I mean, Donald Trump's doing pretty well in the polling in Wisconsin, but it has Harris up by 18 points here. Michigan's tied. It's got Harris up 18 points here. That's pretty peculiar. They're both the same. I mean, the news has been bad for Harris out of these states. Rashida Tlaib refused to endorse Harris, and you had a major Somali leader come out and endorse Trump. So I guess I would say stop paying attention to this. It looks like, as Colin would say, it's part of the coordinated PSYOP effort to make it look like Kamala Harris has come from behind momentum. And I do not think she does. At this point, any momentum she has in the polls is because over half the country has voted already and Republicans are done. And all that's left in the panels is people who just want to drive a positive Harris narrative, just like all the people simping after Ann Coulter right now. And, you could probably find other ways to validate my theories. I just went to Google Trends, and as the quartering would say, desperation is a stinky cologne, but this is where we're at. Searches for Epstein in the last day or two have skyrocketed off the charts. Everybody's just super interested in Jeffrey Epstein all of a sudden. There's probably a lot of other stuff out there that you could point to. I'd love to see your thoughts on Twitter. Come follow me at Mark_R_Mitchell. As you see, we like to have a lot of fun there. And finally, one other point. We've been talking about Mark Halperin some, and he came out and said, listen, Donald Trump is crushing it in the Sun Belt based on information he's gotten from his sources. And based on bipartisan sources, he thinks that Donald Trump is strongly favored in Wisconsin. And of course, if that happens, unless she picks up some really safe Republican states, it's a lock. There's no way. And he doesn't, he's not the end all be all, but he knows a lot of people. He knows a lot about politics, and he is making an assessment that based on his sources, Donald Trump is winning these things. But he's also said that he is very concerned about the mental health of America. And I agree with him. As you know, from following us, we've been closely tracking the level of possible violence in America. But here's one more thing, and this is dark. But if you go to Google Trends and just look for the term suicide, it was very high. This spike here was exactly January 1st, 2016. I can tell you that the country is way more divided. There's way more gaslighting. There's way more cognitive dissonance. The news is reaching ridiculous levels. As we know, 3/4 of MSNBC watchers, their number one and number two issues are protecting democracy. Overwhelmingly, that's the first issue, and abortion. And they think Donald Trump is going to take their democracy away. I think we are in for a really rough couple of months, regardless of what happens in the polls. Sorry to end on such a bleak note. So here, have a meme. This one made me laugh out loud. Sorry, it's very irreverent. I actually sang at Jimmy Carter's birthday, 75th birthday in the United States Naval Academy Men's Glee Club. He's a great guy. But this is true. I did say it. A lot of people have talked about the impact of what his death would mean on the race. It probably would give Harris a bounce. That's a very cynical thing to say. But I don't like laughing at this, but it is funny. So anyways, I would not worry about Iowa. Chill out. It's going Republican, probably more than it did last time. And I don't understand what the implications are for the Seltzer poll. But if this is a big miss for her, it's going to be a real problem for her reputation. And people have said, well, what about your reputation? You're really putting your neck out there on the line. And quite frankly, I'm not, because almost every single pollster from a national popular vote perspective is between my Trump plus 3 and tied. And so all of that's within essentially the margin of error. And again, I think that Donald Trump is going to outperform what the New York Times has in its polls, as does the New York Times head pollster, Nate Cohn. So again, stay frosty out there, head on a swivel. But like I said this week, we may be seeing 1980 Reagan versus Carter if you took Anderson out of the race and gave most of his votes to Carter. So I hope to see you next week. Follow us on Twitter at Rasmussen_poll. I'm there at Mark_R_Mitchell. Like the video, follow us on YouTube or Rumble, and thanks for watching.